Hi, hello, and welcome to LX2 Codependency Coaching. I am Stella. We are recording live in my kitchen. I had been thinking about a podcast topic and I couldn't figure it out. Anyway, one finally came to me this morning, and it was based on a conversation that I've had, or a couple conversations, right? But also just this awareness. So today we are going to talk about failure to thrive, and usually that term, failure to thrive, is given to babies, which is just kind of sad, right? There was the there have been these like images and videos, and certainly when we talk about development of children, failure to thrive is the unfortunate diagnosis that is given to babies and children who are not given a lot of hope that they will make it past a certain age. A lot of times they're smaller in size developmentally and, physically and emotionally. They do not show the milestones of children who are doing well and they're not given a great prognosis. There were these images in our develop children development books. What is it? Anyway, my brain is not working right this moment. But so there are these images of usually children in orphanages, historically in other countries, that are not able to speak or walk or grow because they're given the bare necessities of like food, shelter, clothing, but they are not engaged with in an emotional space. And a lot of times, they don't have orphanages the way that they here in this country, the way that they do in other countries, or have historically had them. And so they are alive, right? They are able to feed and take sustenance, but at some point they just stop. It's a really sad thing, but the reason it had me thinking is I had a client bring it up actually, and she was talking about how she was able to kind of get through life by meeting her own needs. And as a lot of us are, we are, living, we're alive, but we are not thriving. And as it relates to relationships, I was thinking about that idea, right, of like the failure to thrive in a relationship where, yeah, our basic needs are met and we are able to exist in relationship, but the relationship itself is not thriving. As I've shared with you guys in the past, when I work with couples, the relationship is my client, right? And so a thriving relationship is one that continues to grow and continues to, really have all the parts, and it's not just, existing. A lot of times, especially in couple relationships that have been in relationships for a long time, they describe themselves as living as roommates. And that is not the goal, right? I think of often the relationships where there's one person, kind of doing a lot of the work, and especially doing their work to be able to manage themselves. And then once they start doing really well and they're thriving in other parts of their experience, they then start to focus on the relationship that is not growing. It is not thriving. And so we think of the three levels of like survival, just getting through, living, doing a little bit more than that, and then thriving, really having growth of experience and doing a lot of different things. When we get past that survival experience, then yeah, we should be living, and then the next level is thriving. And specific to relationships, be it romantic or friendships or, those kinds of things, at some point we can reach a plateau and it feels like we're just, existing, right? Surviving, getting through. But in order to thrive in relationships, we have to get to those places where we are having hard conversations, where we are learning skills together, where we are building. And a lot of times, I think it was years ago now, but a client had said something about like, do you just keep going through it? Like, how do people stay married for 30, 40, 50, 60 years? And do they just get to a place where this is as good as it's going to get? Sometimes, But the couples who do well, and I had asked my client recently, like how many marriages he'd been in the marriage that he is in currently, right? And he understood he picked up what I was putting down. He said, we've been through several marriages, right? There's the initial marriage where we got married, said our vows, in front of friends and family, and chose to be in this relationship. But as both of them continue to develop and change and have different experiences, then yeah, you have to reintroduce yourself to your partner. I've said in the past, like, I encourage 5-year check-ins. And in early relationship, I encourage, 1-year check-ins of like, hey, are we still doing well? My daughter is funny. She's an interesting human, haha, and interesting. But she was like, when she talks about her partner, they talk about their business as the relationship, and is the business thriving? Is the business doing well? And so they have check-ins pretty consistently. They've been together for a few years now. And, when I talk about the 5-year check-in, I talk about like, are our goals the same? Are we working on, building a thriving relationship where we are both getting our needs met and we are both growing independently, but also growing together? A 5-year check-in is going to be one of those like 10-year longer relationships. In my marriage, I would get a ring upgrade every 5 years, mostly the ones that I bought myself. And it was interesting, right? It's interesting to think about relationships as thriving, as living, breathing organisms. It's not something that, once you sign the papers and exchange the vows, that we just like stop working on it. But it is an opportunity to start to look at how are we contributing to this dynamic so that it continues to grow and thrive. And so the same is true for like friendships or other relationships. Like, you have to put in effort and work. And so when people say relationships are work, it's that effort that you are putting into, continuing to grow and build so that we don't get stagnant or just take it for granted that things are happening the way they're supposed to. I recently started playing a game on my phone, and I play games on my phone or my tablet at the end of the night just to kind of unwind. And it's really like easy, silly games, or it's like brain, stimulating games where I've like match numbers, blah, blah. Anyway, my point in saying that is that I have started playing a community game. It is not interactive in that like we're all building a community together, like I assume like Minecraft and Roblox and all of those things are. But it is, I'm building a town, a community. And it started with a farm, right? So them growing wheat and corn and blah, blah, blah. And then you add livestock to that. So I've got like chickens and sheep and cows. But as it continues to grow, there are more community buildings. You have to add people. And in order to add people, you add houses. And now it's this like thriving metropolis that used to be this like tiny little farm. And now it's like a town. That is the metaphor, if you will, for relationships, right? Is as we start as two people, if that's the dynamic that you're working on, and then we add people to that, household or whatever, we're both doing work to make that household run efficiently and effectively. I saw a video yesterday or this morning on one of the social media things, and it's this guy, and he's like, cleaning up the kitchen, and he was originally in the garage, and he was talking about how his contribution to how the household runs, he had a perspective originally that he was helping his partner. And then he said, I changed my perspective that I'm not helping, but we are contributing to something growing together, right? When I talk about children, I don't believe in allowance. I don't think that's helpful, though I do believe in money for work. And so there's the things that, chores that contribute to our community, and then there's extra stuff. And so if you want extra money other than, what is contributing to our household, then you do extra things. My daughter really learned that lesson well, and then started a business of picking weeds for the neighbors, because she was like, if I do extra work, I get extra money, and I like nice things, so I'm going to work harder to do that. She was very entrepreneurial in that way. But when we think about a thriving community or a thriving relationship, really thinking about the work and effort it takes to put into those things and the attention paid to the kind of work that you're doing. I work with an EAP or employee assistance program for lots of industries, different businesses, both corporate and otherwise, and really helping with people who are in the working population. How do they stay effective in not just their job, so feeling good enough to be at their work environment, but also then helping with relationships, and again, romantic or otherwise. But in order for a relationship to thrive, you have to put in the effort. In order for your partner to feel appreciated, you have to put in the effort. Saying thank you is something I teach people in general, but I definitely teach partners in relationship, because sometimes we get to that place where we take things for granted, where we just assume that the other person knows that we appreciate what they're doing. We can't assume anything. And part of a thriving, growing individual and relationship is that we have to acknowledge and use that positive reinforcement. We have to say thank you. We have to appreciate it. One of the harder parts is that, when we have to remind someone to do something, what I've heard a lot of times, especially from women, is they don't want to be a nag, so they just stop asking, right? They stop saying words of like, hey, I need your support with this, or I need help. A lot of times, and back to my original client who brought up failure to thrive, you stop asking for your needs, right? Most of us will ask at least 100 times, not all at the same time, but for our needs to be met. And at some point, we'll just stop asking, right? And that is the lack of thriving in a relationship, is at some point when I stop talking about what I need, that's where you need to start paying attention. When I get quiet about all of those things in relationship, recognize that I've got one foot out the door and a bag packed. And that's going to be true in any relationship, right? Most times when people ask and ask and ask and ask and ask, it's a challenging and humbling thing to ask for your needs, especially when you didn't get your needs met as a child, right? I have talked to clients who, especially in relationship, right? How did you get your needs met? That's one of the 4 pillars that I work on with clients. And a lot of times they will say, well, I just learned to do things on my own because my parents were busy, or there was a sick kid in our family dynamic, or they weren't available or around. And so I learned to get my own needs met. So now that I'm in a relationship with someone who cares about me and loves me, I don't always trust that I will get my needs met. So I just do it myself, right? One of the practices that I do with couples, especially if they both grew up in households where they didn't get their needs met, or they didn't feel like their voice was heard, is to practice when someone says, hey, can I support you? Is there something, do you need help? Saying yes. Even if you can do it yourself, because we know that we are all capable of doing it ourselves. But to say, yes, I could use support. That would be helpful. Is one of the things that I practice on my own often, is when someone offers support, even if it's something simple, can I hold the door for you? Or can I reach that for you? Having to say yes and being comfortable with doing that, right? But if you've been in a relationship for a long time and the assumption is that you're not going to get your needs met no matter how many times you ask, you'll get quiet. You'll stop growing. You'll stop participating in the relationship because you don't trust that something's going to happen, or you have paid attention to patterns long enough to recognize that's just not going to happen, right? I've shared with you guys on multiple occasions the 2 relationships that I was in long term, and at some point I just stopped asking, right? I just assumed that I wasn't going to get it, so I started doing things on my own. And the more things I did on my own, the more I recognized I don't have to be in this, right? And that's not to say that my partners at the time weren't, great human beings. They were great human beings. They were just not human beings I trusted that I could get my needs met with, so I stopped asking, right? In the house that I grew up in as the oldest child, at some point, as there were more people that were added to our community, my needs stopped being important. And so I learned how to take care of them on my own. I became hyper independent. I became that person who was so strong. But I stopped asking. So then consequently in other relationships, I felt like, okay, well, my needs aren't going to get met here. I can go in with hopes and, all the goals that, maybe I'll get it this time. But at a certain point, if it didn't work, then it stopped thriving. I was getting by on the bare basics. There is a podcast episode in my catalog called Living in Deprivation, and some people get really comfortable living or existing in deprivation. They survive just fine, but are they thriving, right? And so it's something to pay attention to. I have these conversations, one-on-one with clients or in a couple's dynamic, really asking, like, do you feel like your relationship is thriving? People won't come into my office if their relationship is thriving. They will come in if it's hanging on by a thread or just surviving, right? And so, yeah, that was where my head was at this morning, really thinking about how I wanted to share the podcast with you and really recognize, like, are you surviving? Are you living? Or are you thriving in the dynamics and relationships that you're in? And the same is true, like I said, for friendships, is that if you have started to notice a decline in effort, right? First of all, are they reaching out? Are you reaching out? Are you the one who's scheduling all the plans? Are you the one who is, making more of the effort to connect? If those other people are not, it starts to, not thrive. Sometimes it's like, oh, my friend, we don't talk, but, there's somebody I can rely on. Or I'm always going to be there for them, right? And really recognizing, is someone showing up with that same effort? I talk about reciprocity a lot because it is one of the hallmarks of how we are in a symbiotic, like, are we both putting in the effort? Are we both making, sacrifices and time for each other? Or is someone doing more of the sacrificing and the other person is doing more of the benefiting? The video that I watched earlier was like, I stopped seeing my contribution to our community or our household as helping my partner and started recognizing that we're both putting in the effort, right? It doesn't always look the same and it doesn't always look equal, but if we are both contributing, then things are more likely to thrive, right? Back to these unfortunate orphanage images of children who are existing. They're alive, right? But they're small. They don't talk. Developmentally and mentally, they are not hitting milestones. And it's unfortunate, really, to think about the failure to thrive where, something is surviving okay, but it is not living and it's certainly not thriving. The same is going to be true for our relationship dynamics, right? Same is going to be true for our friendships or those things that and I talked about matching energy in the past. I'll put in the same effort and energy that you're putting in. Now, there is a caveat to that. Sometimes people don't have it to give, right? And that's something to pay attention to. If I continue to expect someone to show up with the same effort and energy without taking into consideration that they are going through something, that they are struggling with their own mental health, they're just surviving, right? So I think about, people who are just getting through, right? When they are struggling with their own stuff, when they are going through grief, when they are having their own mental health issues, when they are barely just trying to get by, right? They are at that struggle bus situation. And then I go in with all these needs and demands. I'm not going to get those met. But if I don't acknowledge, oh, they are struggling, they are having a hard time, they are going through their own experience, they cannot show up for me in the same way. If I'm doing, all the things to make sure that I'm thriving, and then I go and expect that from someone else without recognizing they are struggling, then yeah, that's an unhelpful dynamic to have that expectation, right? And so when we are in relationship for years and years and years, if someone doesn't have it to give, then yeah, I'm going to give more. That's just how that works. But if they start doing better, right? I've built them back or I've contributed or helped and supported them to get back to where they are thriving. And then they're also not pouring back. Yeah, I can only do that for so long. I can only give until I can't anymore, right? I don't have it. And it sucks because a lot of times we'll stay in something and feel like, oh, I'm abandoning them while they are down. What you aren't acknowledging is that they actually need the opportunity to get better. If you are contributing and contributing and contributing and they are not able to, or they get better and then they're not able to give it back, then that's something to pay attention to, right? They talk about relationships being 50-50, which mathematically you would assume that that's a thing. But in an interdependent relationship, we are actually supposed to show up 100-100 and then kind of figure out how to manage that dynamic. But not everybody can stay at 100 all the time, right? Sometimes people are, like I said, going to go through things and they're going to need support. And so when we are socialized, or at least, our development has said, we're not going to get our needs met, so we're just going to figure it out ourselves. We're going to give 100 to ourselves, right? But if other people come into that dynamic, then we have to meet them where they're at. A long time ago, my accountability buddy said, I want to meet somebody so that I can show up at 90 and trust that they're going to bring that 10%, right? And again, it's matching energy. I don't want to be in a relationship with someone who can only give me 50%. That's not how I function, and it's surviving, right? I want to be able to be in a relationship with someone and understand that sometimes they cannot give it, right? So then I cannot go with those demands or expectations into that dynamic. What I can do is support someone through it and, see if they show up also when I am struggling. But that's how we thrive, right? Sometimes we're going to be at survival. That's true. And sometimes we're going to be at living. Also true. But if the goal is thriving, right, growing and having, that higher experience or expectation, then we both have to put in the effort, or we all have to put in the effort in order for that community to thrive. Really thinking that, sometimes people are really good at asking for their needs, and the people who are really good at asking for their needs have been socialized and developed in an environment where their needs were met. Those of us who are hyper independent and struggle with asking for our needs, that was not our experience. And we continue to show up in that way, right? But in order for something to thrive, everybody has to participate. And it's not helping, it's participating in the community so the community grows, right? It's participating at a level. And so again, when we're raising littles and we're in, that couple or marriage dynamic and we've added people to our community, we do have to support them a little bit more because they cannot contribute at that point. They are, basically potatoes who need to be fed and changed and burped and put to bed. But as they grow and develop, right, it brings joy to our community. It brings experience to our community as we continue to raise them, meeting their needs as they continue to thrive. And, we get to have a richness in our experience, right? But it does create effort. It does take a village. It takes a community for the community to thrive. It takes effort. And that happens not all in equal measure, but consistently over time, right? That means we're going to have to ask for our needs. We're going to have to see who shows up and how they show up. And then we're also going to have to acknowledge when this community is not working for me anymore, right? We're going to have to change the experience, right? Sometimes we are working at a job, and if we're doing all the work and we're holding on to resentment and we're frustrated, then yeah, maybe I need to find a new community to be part of. There's your nugget. I had a brief amount of time before, clients and changing locations and doing all the things, but I wanted to make sure that you had a podcast for the week. And if you need to get a hold of me, it's lx2.cod.coach@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Luna_X2_LLC. You can follow me on Facebook at LunaX2LLC. And I hope that you are thriving. If you are not and you are living, but that is the goal, to thrive, figure out where the effort is coming from, right? Do you need to put in more effort? Do you need to ask for someone to put in more effort? Do you need to change your environment, right? Those are your choices. But hopefully you will all get to the place where you thrive, even momentarily, but you'll feel it. You'll know what it is because you feel like you're growing and you feel like you are supported and you feel like you are in the right environment. Anyway, there's your nugget. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.